Welcome into the Commanders Report live show presented by Prize Picks. I am your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today to talk some Commanders football, which these days usually means we have to talk about Brandon Aiyuk. And unfortunately, this has been a situation that's been unfolding all throughout the 2026 offseason. And today's no exception, guys. We will be talking about the latest Commanders news and rumors, which will be Brandon Aiyuk update heavy. We'll also talk a little bit about Stefon Diggs, who is still in the DMV. He is working out, and he was actually working out with somebody in a Commanders hoodie at the University of Maryland yesterday. Could he be getting some connections inside the Commanders building, and could they sign Diggs instead of Aiyuk? We'll talk about that in our first segment. Then we'll get into a real fun segment here, guys, where I've got my scheme breakdown for new offensive coordinator David Blough. We're going to be talking about kind of the core tenets of the Ben Johnson offensive philosophy and why it could transform the Washington Commanders offense and quarterback Jayden Daniels. Then we can get into my first roster projection of the year here, our post-OTA Commanders roster projection will be coming up later in the show as well. And of course, don't go anywhere. Make sure you get your questions in for our live Q&A, our mailbag that we do every single week right here on the Commanders Report live show. So if you guys want to get on the show today, there's two ways that you guys can get a question on the channel today. First way you can do so is use hashtag Commanders down there in the live chat room. The real ones know that putting hashtag Commanders, then your question right after that in the same post, in the same comment, we'll put your comment and your question in consideration to be put on the show for free today. And then if you super chat any dollar amount, $2, $5, $10, doesn't matter to me, guys. If you super chat, you donate to the channel, we'll make sure to get your question on the mailbag guaranteed. So greatly appreciate your guys' support. We already got over 130 people watching live here on a beautiful Thursday evening. So type those me's in the chat for a shout out if you've liked the stream already. Looks like we got a good crew already here. I see Shaggy in there. What's up? Good to see you. Got Allison. We got Finley. We got Terry. We got that kid Brody. We got my lovely wife Cassie Sperry in the chat. We've got Terry Maples. We've got Brian Love. What's up, Brian? Good to see you, my friend. We got Finley Barber. We've got Stono Man. Hope I'm saying that right. We've got Henry, Shaggy. We've got Davino Hani. Hope I'm saying that right. Got a good crew of Commanders fans ready to get things going. So without further ado, let's bring in our producer, as always. Mr. Ponzi is joining us here today. Ponzi, it's good to see you. It's not great to see Brandon Aiyuk all over IG, though. I'll tell you that right now. I'm getting pretty exhausted from this entire saga. Maybe he's just trolling. Maybe he's just trying to keep his name in this situation in the news cycle to put pressure on the Niners. I don't know what the whole situation is, but he was silent. He was silent for a long time. A couple weeks ago was his first post in a long time on Instagram, and now it seems like every few hours we are getting a different Brandon Aiyuk post. We might even get one over the course of this live show. But people are saying it all over ESPN, all over NFL Network, all over Fox Sports 1. The more this guy opens his mouth on IG, the more money he's losing and the more opportunities he is losing. But it doesn't seem like Brandon is too upset by that. It seems like he has a sole focus here. He has a mission in life. He wants to be a Washington Commander. He wants to play with his buddy and good friend, Jayden Daniels, the quarterback of the Commanders, and to hell to the rest of the National Football League, essentially. What is your take on this situation, man? It's definitely a bit crazy.
I mean, I definitely do think, like you said, it's a bit crazy, and unfortunately so, because, it's looking a lot as of now, unless this is some sort of master scheme for Brandon Aiyuk, that he's kind of heading towards this Antonio Brown path. And, you hate to speculate that. You hate to, talk about someone's mental health in this capacity, but at the end of the day, I'm worried for him, not only as a person, but just in general. I think, obviously these Instagram stories, he does not look well. He looks like he's in shape. He looks like he's, in football, condition. And, if you're to believe George Kittle, he is in, cutting on a dime, 22 miles per hour. But at some point, you got to wonder, Sperry, is this person okay? Because I don't know, man. It's he only wants to play for the Commanders. That point's obvious. But are the Commanders going to be bringing him in? If you're to believe some sources, the Commanders are, a little bit questioning of his behavior. And obviously, he had the question itself of he got that big contract from the San Francisco 49ers and he gave up on them. He stopped reporting to the team. And then he goes on this social media outburst. So, I don't know, man. I kind of want to lean that obviously Jaden Daniels is going to vouch for him. So I'm going to be leaning at a 50% or 60% chance. I think it's better than, him not playing. But, I mean, the Commanders are the only team that's going to pick him up.
Yeah, and, the only reason why he would feasibly do this now, if he's not well mentally, then using logic to try and figure out why he's doing these things is just moot, because that's not really a part of the situation, and you hope that it's not that. You really hope that it's not that. He's so young. He's only 28 years old. Like, for him to be suffering from that kind of disease this point in his life would be devastating. It really would. So I'm really hoping that he's just trolling. He's just he's just kind of I don't know, emoting, and he's just frustrated with the 49ers, and this is just a stupid decisions that he's been making. I understand that he's frustrated, but there's better ways to handle this that don't jeopardize potentially your future in the National Football League. And right now, if it's true that the Commanders have told his representation that they plan on signing him this year when the 49ers release him, I would say the best advice I could give him is just to not do anything and just let the process play out. Because, I mean, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, you allow the Commanders to change their mind, right? You want them to, if they've already made up their mind, hey, we're going to bring in Brandon Aiyuk this year, he's going to be our wide receiver too. Once that decision has kind of been told to you as being made, you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. And if you do something really weird on these IGs or really bad on these IG stories, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, there's a world here where the Commanders say, we're not going to take that risk on this guy. And, with the bridges that he's already burnt, if the Commanders don't sign him, it sounds like no one is going to sign him. So I'm just hoping that he's okay mentally. And my wish for him is that, he is on the Commanders this year and he plays really well. And, he and Jaden Daniels play amazing, and he plays with a chip on his shoulder for what happened in San Francisco, and he earns, another chance to be a high earner in this league. And I hope that, long term he can be mentally healthy. It's just, there's a lot of questionable things being done by this young man. And I'm just hoping that he's okay. $2 here from Terry Maple says, sign the Diggs brothers and let's roll. Hail to the Redskins. Listen, man, I don't think they're going to sign a corner. I think they like their cornerback room right now. Now, I think you can make an argument that they should bring in another veteran corner. Amik Robertson did not play well last year. Mike Samerstrill had definitely a sophomore slump, if you will. He played better when he was playing on the outside, but it wasn't a great season for Mikey. And right now, you're really banking on both of them to have bounce-back seasons. And if they don't, you have a Kella Witherspoon. Will Harris can play in the slot if you need him to. If those two guys, or if just one of them isn't having a true bounce-back season this year, the Commanders' defense could be in trouble if their depth pieces and Akella Witherspoon can't save the day. And I'm not relying on Akella Witherspoon to save the day here, Ponzi. So, I would actually give Trayvon Diggs a chance if he wants one. And then same thing goes for Stephon Diggs. I've been saying on this channel that I think Diggs is the more reliable and the safer option if you're looking for a wide receiver
100%.
too. With Aiyuk, it's not just the off-field stuff, guys. It's the on-field stuff too. He's 2 years older than the last time we saw him. He's coming off a major injury. And even though George Kittle was saying that he's running 22 miles an hour, stopping on dime, all that different stuff, you don't know if he's going to be able to do that consistently over a 17-game schedule and stay healthy, right? That was a very major knee injury that he suffered. And I know that some people will say, it's low risk, high reward. And in one way, it is. Brandon Aiyuk, very talented individual, and you don't have to give up that much for him. It'll be a one-year deal with no guaranteed money. If he misbehaves, if he steps out of line, if he gets injured again, you can just cut bait with him and you don't have to see him ever again.
Yep.
Right? But the risk portion of it is that if he stinks, you're essentially throwing out this season. Which is something I don't want to do, right? That you only have so many years with Jaden Daniels on his rookie contract. And if you bring in Brandon Aiyuk and he's not the wide receiver 2 that you're envisioning for this offense, and let's say Terry McLaurin misses some games with injury again, who do you have on this team? Like, seriously, you're going to be relying on De'Ami Brown and Traylon Burks again and Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane. I mean, Antonio Williams, I like the kid out of Clemson. I think he's going to show some good things this year, Ponzi, but if Brandon Aiyuk is not a reliable wide receiver too, and if this team doesn't have a reliable number 2 receiver, I think the chances of this team, being able to go on a run come January go down quite a bit. And it puts this team in a very vulnerable position at the wide receiver position for the second straight year, which is not what I want to do. I'd rather bring in Diggs. This team still has top 3 amounts of cap space in the National Football League. You can afford him, and he was the number 1 receiver on a team that made the Super Bowl last year, and he wants to play for the team. And he's not coming off a major injury, and he doesn't go crazy on IG. I mean, what are we doing here, man? Stephon Diggs, to me, makes a lot more sense than Brandon Aiyuk. So that's what I would do. What do you say to that?
So I really do think, in terms, I'll talk about Trayvon first. I think, corner is a very volatile position, although I do think that Devontae Jones' scheme will elevate that talent a little bit. I do think that you're asking a lot of these young guys, and even Trey Amos, came off a really bad injury last year. He was playing phenomenal in the time that he played, but that's still, asking a lot out of these guys, these young guys. And I think, Trayvon Diggs has experience with Dan Quinn, obviously probably a different scheme. This year, definitely a different scheme, actually. But, I do think that it's really not the end of the world. He's not going to be asking for a lot, maybe just a little bit above the vet minimum because, he ran himself out of Dallas and he sucked in Green Bay. Let's be real. And then Stephon, what are we doing with wide receiver 2? I do really think that if we're going to be realistic about this, and it's not saying Stephon Diggs is a, drama-adverse person. Obviously, the Patriots didn't bring him back for a reason. They cut him for a reason because of that legal action, because of that those character concerns, and he was clear to them. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, Yep. And I do think that if that's the case, then he's going to take a hometown discount. He's already talked about it. I really do think that there's no negative as much as there would be a negative to signing Brandon Aiyuk. Yeah. At this point, you have the money to do both, and you have the money to even sign Trayvon with it, a package deal. They probably would, take that discount, to play together and in their home city. So, or in their home state. So, I really don't think that there's a risk involved with this. Trayvon Diggs would be a bench player at best. Maybe he rotates in, and maybe he does want that starting role. Maybe he wouldn't even come in here. But it's not looking good for Trayvon. But Stephon Diggs would be an immediate upgrade in this wide receiver room. And as much as I love Jaden Daniels, and I think that he will elevate this offense once again, he's learning a new scheme. Get him the help that he needs.
Yeah. And listen, man, I understand that Brandon Aiyuk is frustrated with the 49ers. I'm not saying the 49ers handled this situation perfectly either, but what happened last year, Brandon Aiyuk wanted to do his rehab with his people instead of with the team, which is fine. By the way, teams will let you do that, but before you come back to the team, they have to check up on you. And listen, man, when you make the kind of investment that you made in him, Richard Sherman made this point on his podcast yesterday. If you invest that much in a player, you have the right to kind of know how that player's rehab is going. That's just, I think that's fair, right? But Brandon clearly didn't think that was fair, and he just ghosted the 49ers. And
exactly what he did.
And the 49ers voided his guarantees, and Brandon did not fight that. He just doesn't want to be a part of the 49ers organization anymore. That's fine. And I think what the 49ers have done this offseason is just kind of pussy behavior, to be quite honest with you, holding on to him, even though they know he wants to go somewhere else specific, and they're just holding him hostage, right? I'm not saying the 49ers are, perfect in this, but there's other ways to vent your frustrations and handle the situation than calling your previous employer dumb for giving you all that money. It's do you think any other team's going to want to give you a big contract after you just called the last team that did it morons? There's just not a lot of stuff that makes sense with the things that Brandon Aiyuk is saying on these IG posts. And like I said, I hope he's okay. I really do. And, I get the frustrations and all that different stuff. And I hope if he signs with the Commanders, he balls out. And there's a chance he could, right? But there's just a lot of red flags here. And in a season where you have Jaden Daniels under contract on a rookie deal, I feel like it's safer to go with Stephon Diggs. He shouldn't be that expensive. He was a good player just last year. There's not as many question marks on or off the field with Diggs. So for me, that's the guy that I would prefer. But listen, man, if Brandon Aiyuk becomes a Washington Commander, you bet your sweet ass I'm gonna be cheering like heck for him. I'm gonna be hoping that he gets 1,000 yards and he gets a huge contract here next offseason and he earns every penny of that. It's just, man, when you look at the situation, it is a little bit scary to me. And I think the Commanders are making a big risk by, kind of putting all their eggs in the Brandon Aiyuk basket at this point. Nick Nelson with a 2. Nick, if you have a question, I'd be happy to put you on the mailbag here today.
He comments, I agree, Diggs brothers. But if you have a question, I'll put you in the mailbag at the end.
Yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, I would go with the Diggs brothers, man, or at least just Stephon. If you don't want to bring in Trayvon, whatever. Like, Trayvon has not played particularly well over the last couple of seasons, but I think Stephon, if I were the Washington Commanders, I would prefer him. But hey, man, if Brandon Aiyuk is eventually going to be a Washington Commander, and I think he probably will be at this point, I'm going to be rooting for him. I'm going to hope that he has success here, and I think there's a chance that he could. It's just there's some red flags there, Ponzi. Now, before we get into our first segment here, if you guys want to help support the channel, I would greatly appreciate if you guys go check out our merch that we have up on our website at chatsports.com/DC merch. Ponzi's putting the link to that in the comments and description of today's live show. If you guys want to check it out, we got our Sunny Styles t-shirts on there. We got our Terry McLaurin t-shirts, which come in 3 different colors, by the way. We have our Commanders Report logo t-shirts that are available on our website right now as well. So that's chatsports.com/DC merch to pick yours up today. You guys have really been buying these things up like hotcakes all off season long. I can't thank you guys enough for the support. So if you haven't gotten yours already, you guys want a really cool shirt to wear at Commanders training camp or at your summer barbecue or wherever, you guys can go to chatsports.com/DC merch to pick yours up today. All right, so without further ado, let's get into our first segment of the day here, folks. Talking about the latest surrounding Brandon Aiyuk, talking about the latest surrounding Stefon Diggs and the wide receiver 2 search here in Washington. Then we'll get into David Blough's scheme breakdown here, kind of get away from the Aiyuk situation for a while to talk about the scheme that the Commanders will be running this year and kind of the core tenets of what you guys can expect. Then we'll get into my first roster projection for the Washington Commanders this year. And spoiler alert, Brandon Aiyuk is on this roster projection, okay? So just so you guys know that. And then we'll get into your questions. So if you have any questions or concerns about the Aiyuk situation, about Diggs, about anything else, make sure you get your questions in there. Hashtag Steelers and Super Chat, or hashtag Commanders and Super Chat to get in on the live program. So without further ado, let's get into it right now. The latest news and rumors surrounding the Washington Commanders coming at you right now. Welcome into the Commanders Report by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app to get an additional $50 in lineups from our friends at Prize Picks. And guys, it's another day here on the Commanders Report, which means more Brandon Aiyuk shenanigans on social media. He posted a number of different IG stories and even posts over the last time, since the last time I talked with you guys, starting with what happened yesterday, where he went on his IG and he said a very clear message to both the San Francisco 49ers and the Washington Commanders. He says, if I'm crazy or if I'm capping, tell them boys, the 49ers, cut me today and I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow. We'll see who's capping. And then today, Aiyuk was back at it again, posting a video of himself on some designer clothes, dropping a crap ton of money on the floor of his closet, kind of trolling the San Francisco 49ers yet again for paying him all that money guaranteed. And he's now back to wearing his Commanders hat as well. He posted a video to his IG account breaking down, he was kind of doing like a kind of trolling situation here where he was saying, go get your tickets to my comeback tour, the championship tour, if you will. This is the exact quote from Aiyuk on the IG video on his story. What's up, everybody? It's your boy, BB. I'm back in action and back on tour this fall. Go to www.commanders.com to get your tickets and watch us rock out. And then he plays the air guitar. This is somebody, once again, that is making it abundantly clear he wants to play for the Washington Commanders and play with his best friend in the world, quarterback Jayden Daniels, all right? And, he's done this a number of times over the last several weeks. It's not a secret that Brandon Aiyuk wants to play for the Washington Commanders, and he's definitely seems sure he wants to be here, right? Like, he's already bought a house apparently, or at least he's staying in a house in Virginia. He's wearing that Commanders hat, and it's shown up in a number of these IG posts and now videos. And now coming up here on the Commanders Report, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on these recent updates from Aiyuk. I'm going to be breaking down my latest thoughts on this unfolding saga here in Washington. But before we get into the rest of today's show, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors here on the show today, which is SeatGeek. The Commanders' 2026 schedule is now set, and you can now purchase individual game tickets for every home, away, and international game. The Commanders will play this season on the SeatGeek app. Use code CHAT10 to get 10% off your next set of tickets. And guys, the SeatGeek app is really easy to use and maneuver, and you can get views from your seat. And also, they've got a really cool feature here where you guys can take a look at the full view of Northwest Stadium, of course, the home of the Washington Commanders, where you guys can see all the great value tickets that are available. The one that you're looking at right now is for the home opener versus the reigning Super Bowl champions with the Seattle Seahawks coming to town in Week 3. And whether you're going to a baseball game this summer with the kids or an Ed Sheeran concert with the wife, SeatGeek has your back. Each ticket is rated on a value scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad in terms of the value that those tickets are being sold for. And of course, I have a code for you guys to get an even better deal. Use code CHAT10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. One more time, that's 10% off any tickets with promo code CHAT10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later on. And a big thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. Now, personally, guys, I am personally just tired of talking about this, but, every time Aiyuk puts out an update, there's new things that get talked about, and, there's more points to be made. So, unfortunately, we are here yet again. And, unfortunately, the more that Brandon Aiyuk speaks, the more worried I am getting. There's been a bunch of people on ESPN and other places saying the more that he talks, the less of the chance it is that he will be signed by the Washington Commanders, let alone any other team in the National Football League. And I think Jeremy Fowler from ESPN today said every time he opens his mouth, he is lighting money on fire, which is certainly some strong language there. But listen, man, when you're saying I only want to play for one team and, you're kind of having some, trolling behavior at the very best, maybe abnormal behavior at the very worst on IG, I think BA is probably getting some terrible advice from somebody, and if he's not getting advice from anybody, he's just listening to himself. And I'm sure there's people in his life that are trying to tell him, hey, maybe stay quiet for a bit and let this process play out so that you can sign with the team that you want to play for instead of scaring off the team you want to play for in the Washington Commanders. But he's obviously not listening to that advice. And listen, man, some of the facial expressions that he's having on these IG videos and all this different stuff. Listen, man, I don't know. Brandon, personally, I don't know what his mental state is at, but all I can tell you right now is I really, really hope this young man is mentally okay, because some of this stuff is a little bit concerning, right? He was silent on Instagram and social media in general for almost like a year, and then all of a sudden here, it's like an avalanche where we're getting a brand new update from his account almost, every few hours. And, I think what he's trying to do, and I think the logic behind it, is that I think he thinks he's putting pressure on the 49ers to release him by, keeping the story in the news cycle, continuing to have his name and the situation be mentioned so that the 49ers in theory would be like, we don't want to deal with it anymore, we're just going to release him. But in reality, he's just being perceived as out of control, not just by the 49ers, not just potentially by the Washington Commanders, but definitely the rest of the National Football League. And if he's trying to keep his options open for the future, if it doesn't work out in Washington this year, does he really want to be perceived in this way? I just don't think that this is advisable behavior for somebody that's already got maybe an image issue out there. And my advice to him, man, would be, if you want the Commanders to sign you, if you want a chance to prove to the world that you're still a good football player, the best way to do that is not to troll people in this kind of situation on Instagram. It's best to, let the process play out. Stay in shape, get ready for the season, make sure you're in the best possible shape you can be in. And then when, the process plays itself out and you're ready to join the Washington Commanders, you are ready to go and, really show the rest of the world that you can still do this thing. You can still do it at a high level And for the Commanders' sake, for Brandon Aiyuk's sake, I really hope that he's able to do that this year. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. What is the percent chance that Brandon Aiyuk will play for the Washington Commanders this year? Put it on a scale of 0 to 100 for me down there in the comments section. And coming up here on the Commanders Report, Stefon Diggs, another potential wide receiver 2 option for the Washington Commanders, was working out in the DMV area at the University of Maryland, where he went to school. Going to be breaking down something that was pretty interesting from his workout yesterday that I think every Commanders fan should know. But before we get into the rest of today's show, I want to tell you about our other sponsor, our presenting sponsor here on the Commanders Report, which is Prize Picks. And I've got an awesome projection for you guys to take advantage of here for the Commanders' Week 1 matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. You guys can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. You guys can take a look here at my Week 1 lineup here, where I'm taking the less on Jalen Hurts passing yards, the more on passing yards for quarterback Jaden Daniels, and then the more on receiving yards for Terry McLaurin. But the projection that I want to talk about in particular here, guys, is the less on Jalen Hurts passing yards. Not only are the Eagles implementing a brand new offense with Sean Mannion, bringing a Sean McVay-style offense, lots of under-center stuff for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. That's something Hurts has not really been used to throughout his career, but also the Commanders are bringing in a new defense, a Brian Flores kind of chaos-style defense that I think is going to put Jalen Hurts in a pretzel mentally, which I think is going to lead to the less here on the 215.5 projected passing yards for Hurts in this game. So if you guys want to get your lineup in, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app today. And a big thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. All right, so now let's talk about Stefon Diggs, who was training at College Park, Maryland yesterday. And, you know, I don't know about his pants choice, man. He's kind of wearing like pantaloons or something, but he's wearing a Commanders colored hat that might mean nothing, might mean something there. And he was running routes, and he looked pretty darn crisp running those routes. He even had a one-handed catch. But something that was interesting to me when going over these videos on his IG account is that somebody that's working out with him here, as you can see on the screen, is wearing a Washington Commanders hoodie. And I'm wondering, is this somebody that's currently in the Commanders organization, or is it maybe just like a Maryland Terrapin player that likes the Commanders, is a fan of the team, and is wearing the hoodie? It kind of looks like Tyler Owens, but I don't know, man. I'm not 100% sure if that's T.O. or not here. But definitely interesting that Stefon Diggs is working out in the DMV area, and he's working out with people wearing Commanders apparel. And he was out there, you know, leaping up in the air, making one-handed catches, all this different stuff, looking crisp on his routes. And, you know, he's been in the DMV area over the last several weeks here, getting ready for his charity events that have been going on over the last several weeks or so. So he's in the area, and he's laid on some hints, as we've talked about on this channel, that he would be very willing and very open-minded to playing for the Washington Commanders this year. Now, if you've been watching this channel, guys, you guys know my opinion. I would personally sign Stefon Diggs today over Brandon Aiyuk. And it's more than just like the off-field stuff. Like the IG stuff is one thing, but like Diggs has been more healthy than Aiyuk here. You know, just completed a 17-game schedule plus a full playoff run, which included a run to the playoff or to a run to the Super Bowl. Had over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns for the Patriots just last season. And even though he's getting older, I think that he's more of a reliable option than Brandon Aiyuk at this point. Aiyuk is coming off a major knee injury. You know, there's just a lot of question marks, both from a health perspective and a play perspective, when you just haven't seen a player play in a year and a half. And we've seen Diggs, you know, we saw Diggs just last February, and he was playing at a really high level. So I'd want to bring in Diggs, pair him up with Terry McLaurin. He shouldn't be that expensive. And I know he'd be more expensive than Aiyuk, but he'd probably just take a 1-year prove-it deal. And I think that would make this wide receiver position here in Washington just a bit more stable than it would be if you bring in Brandon Aiyuk. But sound off for me down there in the comment section. Give me your take on the Aiyuk wide receiver 2 situation here in Washington. Do you want Aiyuk here in Washington? Are you really, you know, what do you think of his IG story? stories? Do you blame the Niners for what happened? And you kind of understand his frustration. What's your kind of take on Brandon Aiyuk? Because I think this is a very controversial topic where there's a lot of people that have some very strong takes on Aiyuk. Some people are very strongly, advocating for him. Some people are very, strongly advocating against him, right? So I want to hear your take. Sound off for me down there in the comment section. Let's talk some Commanders football. And that'll be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I will catch you guys next time right here on the Commanders Report. And until next time, guys, go raise some hell. All right, first segment in the books coming up next. It's a fun segment here, guys. We're going to be kind of taking a walk through David Blough's offensive scheme, and really the scheme that is inspiring this new Commanders offense, which is actually the Ben Johnson offense that we've seen have so much success in Detroit, and then also last year in Chicago. So we'll be breaking down kind of the core tenets of what this offense should look like this year and why I'm excited for the future of this offense, Jaden Daniels. And yes, if Brandon Aiyuk is on this team, I think that he would be a fit for this offense, which would be, good news. And then also we'll get into my post-OTA roster projection. And if you're wondering, yes, I do project that Brandon Aiyuk will be on this team when we get into the season. So he will be a part of that. And then, of course, we'll answer your questions. If you have any concerns or anything like that, feel free to get your comment on the show today by using hashtag Commanders or super chatting to guarantee your question gets on the mailbag today. All right. Well, do we have any super chats here, Ponzi? All right. We're good on super chats. So I'll just take a quick drink. And now let's get into it here, guys. The next segment, I hope you guys enjoy it. I put a lot of work into this one. David Blough's offensive scheme breakdown is coming at you guys right now. Welcome into the Commanders Report by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and today on the show, we're going to be breaking down new offensive coordinator David Blough's offensive scheme, kind of breaking down the style of offense that he's kind of taking his inspiration from here, and then kind of breaking down the core tenets of that offensive scheme and why I think it's going to transform the Washington Commanders offense, not only this year, but in the years to come. Now, before we get into the content today, guys, make sure you click that subscribe button, because if you guys want more in-depth Commanders videos like this every single day, that's what we try to provide for you guys right here on the Commanders Report, 100% free. We want to be the channel that Commanders fans come to for in-depth Commanders analysis and news and rumors coverage. So if you guys really want that, you want that daily dose of Commanders news and rumors all throughout the 2026 season, this is where you guys can get that. Click that subscribe button and join our family today. So the thing they have to realize about David Blough is that he is inspired by Ben Johnson, former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions and the current head coach of the Chicago Bears. Blough spent his final season as a quarterback in the National Football League, at least in the preseason, in Ben Johnson's, I believe it was his first year as the offensive play caller there in 2022 there in Detroit. And as you guys can see here, man, the results speak for themselves when it comes to Ben Johnson-led offenses. Right from the jump, when he started as the OC there in Detroit, it was a top 10 offense, arguably a top 5 one, and then they just continuously got better year over year. And in that 2024 season, they were first in points per game and success rate, top 3 in EPA per play as well. They were arguably the best offense in the National Football League that year. And then he takes over the Chicago Bears, and even though there was some growing pains involved with that first-year transition, it was still arguably a top 10 offense in the league last year, and I think Ben Johnson deserves a lot of credit for that. And now coming up here on the Commanders Report, I'm going to be breaking down the 10 kind of core tenets of the Ben Johnson offense from my perspective, talking about what you guys can expect from the Washington Commanders schematically as we move into this new era of Commanders offensive football, why I think this unit is going to be transformed by moving to this new scheme inspired by Ben Johnson. But before we get into the rest of today's show, I want to tell you about a Prize Picks projection that I'm absolutely falling in love with for the Commanders season opener versus the Philadelphia Eagles this year. And it really surrounds Jaden Daniels, okay? Jaden Daniels is somebody that I think is going to have a really good season for the Washington Commanders this year, and I don't think the season opener will be any different. I'm taking the more on passing yards for him. I'm also taking the less on passing yards for Jalen Hurts. I'm taking the more on receiving yards for Terry McLaurin. This is what Prize Picks calls a power play, so you have to get all 3 of these projections correct to cash in. But if you do so for just a $20 entry fee, you could walk away with $95 in winnings. So if you guys want to download the PrizePicks app today, you guys can use HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in additional lineups from our friends at PrizePicks. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app today. And a big thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. All right, so starting with the Ben Johnson offensive breakdown here, and really the foundation of this offense, guys, is that you're going to see a lot of under center, especially on early downs. It doesn't mean that the Commanders will never get in shotgun and never do read options and that sort of stuff with Jayden Daniels. I certainly expect that to be a part of this offensive scheme, but I also think that they want to be more multiple, and we've heard David Blough, Jayden Daniels, Dan Quinn talk about this, where they felt like they were getting a little bit one-dimensional under Cliff Kingsbury's scheme, and now by introducing this under center element, that's really going to do a good job of, kind of keeping defenses on their toes and honest and not really knowing what's coming from this Commanders offense moving forward. Now, a little bit of a fair warning, it may take Jayden Daniels a little bit to get used to this. We saw this with Caleb Williams last year, where a lot of these college quarterbacks coming into the league, they don't have a lot of experience playing under center, and Jayden Daniels is no exception to that. Sometimes it takes some of these quarterbacks a little bit of time to get used to the under center play action game and the under center footwork and all that different stuff, and really get comfortable doing that kind of stuff. You really have to kind of reteach yourself how to play the position when you go from a college style offense, which Jayden has been playing in, frankly, for the last 2 years under Cliff Kingsbury, to a pro style one where he's going to be asked to play under center more often. But kind of like Caleb Williams last year, who kind of struggled early and then he started to really get it towards the end of the year, I'm expecting a similar kind of jump in Jayden Daniels' play, and hopefully by the end of the season, JD is playing as good as any quarterback in the National Football League. And then, another thing that under center stuff really helps with, guys, and this is why Ben Johnson, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay are under center a lot, is because of the rushing attack benefits that you get. All right, when you're in shotgun, because of the angles of the quarterback, of the running back lining up next to the quarterback and such, the angles are not great for a lot of different run schemes, right? You're really condensed to like duo, inside zone, and some power stuff when you're in shotgun. But when you're under center, you can run outside zone way more effectively, right? You have better angles for the running back to take advantage of in pretty much every single run scheme. So, the pro game is much more run-centric than the college game is. And you have to be able to run the football in this league to be a high-caliber offense. So I think, we're going to see a lot of duo and outside zone in this offense. That's what Ben Johnson likes to run in Chicago. It's what he liked to run in Detroit. They'll introduce some power and they'll pull people and they'll get creative with it. It's not just duo and outside zone, but that's kind of the core staples of this run game. I expect that to be the same here in Washington under David Blough. Then another thing here that you do when you're under center is you attack downfield with that play action game, right? The play action game is just way more effective when you're under center, because when you're in shotgun, you kind of do like a half-ass kind of like fake handoff and then you're scanning the defense, right? But when you're under center, you do a full hard fake. You're turning your back to the defense. The defense has a harder time determining, okay, is this a run or a pass when you operate play action from under center, which draws up the linebackers, which kind of opens up that intermediate space on dagger concepts, for example. And I certainly expect the Commanders and Jayden Daniels to attack that intermediate level of the field off of play action this year. Another thing that Ben Johnson's really been known for is pre-snap shifts and motions, and, really doing a good job giving a quarterback answers pre-snap. And that's really what that is all about. You shift certain players to try and get a certain answer from the opposing defense and what they're trying to do. There's a bunch of different examples of that. And then with motions, you can create confusion for defensive assignments. For example, if you have a receiver that goes into motion and kind of goes towards a stacked wide receiver duo on one side, creating pretty much a bunch, it's going to mess with the bunch rules that the defense is going to have, right? Because, that's the way defenses kind of attack quarterback bunches in the National Football League, first one out, first one in, all these different things. If you kind of dirty that look up with a motion, that's going to create some confusion and really scheme some people open. Another thing that motion at the snap does is it messes with the run fits of the defense, and it really forces a defense to really have their run fit assignments down pat. And if they're not, you can really gash them in the run game by doing pre-snap motion. So definitely expect a lot of that from David Blough, way more than what we saw from Cliff Kingsbury. And then also, you're going to have a lot more control at the line of scrimmage for the quarterback. And this is where it really gets exciting for Jayden Daniels, guys, because Dan Quinn keeps talking about his mental quickness and his football IQ and talking about how elite it is. If it really is as good as DQ keeps saying it is, and he can get to the line of scrimmage and he can decipher what a defense is trying to do to him, and he can get into the right play consistently and really become a true tactician, a true surgeon out there, we could be looking at one of the more unstoppable quarterbacks in the National Football League for at least the next half decade, probably more than that, though. So I'm really excited to see if Jayden Daniels can take that next step in his development in this pro-style offense, kind of similar to how Jared Goff, was so prolific in this Detroit Lions offense over the years. Then also in the passing game, you're going to see a lot of pure progressions. Which pretty much means you're going to have a certain set of reads that you're going 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's not based on coverage. You're just reading it out 1, 2, 3, 4 despite coverage. And the reason why NFL offenses have kind of shifted to this, guys, is because it's really hard to decipher what NFL defenses are doing pre-snap. They're doing a really good job at disguising and pre-snap motion and post-snap motion, where if you just have a pure progression that's the same no matter what the defensive structure is for the defense, it makes it easier mentally on the quarterback. So I think that is certainly something that will benefit Jayden Daniels as well. Another thing about this offense, it's very tight end centric. They do a really good job emphasizing the receiving tight end in this offense. For example, Sam Laporta was an instant star for the Detroit Lions when he was drafted there in Detroit, and his athleticism really shined in this offense. And then what did Ben Johnson do the second he got to Chicago? His first draft pick as the head coach of the Chicago Bears was to sign to draft a receiving tight end in Colston Loveland out of Michigan, right? When they already had Cole Kmet. That position is so important that he went out and got his guy right at the beginning of his tenure there in Chicago. And guess what the Commanders did this year, man? They got their athletic tight end in Chigakonkwo, who is going to play such a big role. He's going to be playing that Sam Laporta, Colston Loveland role in this offense, and I think he's going to be an absolute stud for this offense moving forward. And, for the price tag that they got him for, I think he's going to be one of the steals of NFL free agency from this past spring. Then there's also an emphasis on runaways in the passing game. What that means, guys, is any route that is essentially crossing over the middle of the field. Now, there's some exceptions there. There's whip routes and stuff like that. But really the name of the game when it comes to Ben Johnson's passing attack is getting the ball to speedy wide receivers with the ball in their hands in space with blockers in front of them as well. He's so creative and so good at drawing these things up. But he's also creative with the way that he lines receivers up. I mean, they lined up Amon-Ra St. Brown, who obviously is a stud receiver, in the backfield quite a bit there in Detroit when Ben was still the OC there in the Motor City. And I kind of feel like Antonio Williams is built for that kind of role as well with his route running ability. You put him out there on an option route or on a Texas route against a linebacker in man coverage. I mean, especially on third downs, you can really do some nasty things with Antonio Williams out there in the backfield. Not to say he won't play, in the slot where, he's probably going to play a large majority of his snaps, but there's going to be some situations, I think, in a package where they have Antonio Williams in the backfield as a pass-catching running back, at least in terms of alignment. And then the final thing I want to talk about here that's really creative that Ben Johnson kind of is known for, and that's the downfield laterals that he's been implementing both in Chicago and in Detroit. And the lateral has been kind of something that's been lost in NFL schematics over the last, several years. But Ben Johnson, kind of used the lateral in some creative ways where he's got two crossers. You throw the ball to one, crosser, and then you got another guy coming underneath. underneath, the guy that catches the one that's on the deeper crosser, and laterals it to the guy that's coming across, and that almost works as as a screen. And this guy is going to be working. The guy that's receiving the lateral is running full speed, and he's getting the football in space with somebody that's essentially blocking for them out in front. And some of the best play calls that we've seen from Ben Johnson over the last several years have implemented the lateral, and I think we might see some of that and some of that trickeration that Ben Johnson's known for here in the David Blough offense moving forward. Now, let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. How excited are you for this year's Commanders offense? Put it on a scale of 1, meaning not excited at all, to 10, meaning this is going to be one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the entire National Football League. Let me know how you're feeling about this offense down there in the comment section. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, you guys will actually love our defensive scheme breakdown for new defensive coordinator Durante Jones, where I break down the Flores Chaos brand of football that we're going to be having on the defensive side of the ball, which, let me tell you guys, is just as, if not even more exciting than what David Blough is going to be providing for the offensive side of the ball here in the nation's capital. But make sure you guys click that subscribe button, because we're providing you guys this kind of in-depth Commanders content every single day for free, leading up to the start of Commanders training camp and, of course, the start of the 2026 NFL season. So if you don't want to miss any of that action that we're going to be providing for you guys all throughout the summer, make sure you guys click that subscribe button. Until next time, guys, out to the Commanders. 2 more segments to go here, guys. I got my roster projection coming up, and then we'll take your questions on the mailbag. And as always, guys, if you have questions, feel free to put #Commanders in the chat for your chance to get on the show. And you guys can super chat to guarantee your question.
Right now, we only have 2 questions. So let's get them going.
Let's get some of those questions in there. But Ponzi, before we get into the next segment here, I think I've seen a lot of people in the chat saying, Jaden wants Brandon Aiyuk, so that's the guy that we should go get.
Yeah.
And listen, man, it's tricky because you do want to make your quarterback happy, right? And you don't want to make him upset. And, if he doesn't want Stephon Diggs, if he doesn't want any other wide receiver 2 option, he wants his best friend on the team, it's hard to tell the franchise quarterback no in that regard, right? And I think at the end of the day, I think the reason why Aiyuk is so confident and why he feels comfortable putting all this stuff out on IG is because he feels 100% certain they're going to sign him. Yep. That's the only thing that makes sense, is that they've already told him, hey, when the 49ers release you, we're going to sign you immediately. That's why he said it himself on his IG story yesterday. And when he's like, hey, 49ers, cut me so I can sign with the Commanders.
I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow, he said.
Yes, and I think that's exactly what we're gonna see. We're gonna see whenever the 49ers release him, he's going to be in Virginia, and he's going to be ready to sign his contract as fast as he possibly can. And I still think he probably shouldn't be doing the IG stuff because the ink isn't dry, and I wouldn't want to mess with the opportunity to play with Jaden Daniels. I wouldn't want to mess with the chance to play for the Washington Commanders, and I wouldn't do anything to put that future with the team in jeopardy. Not to say that it for sure is. I actually think he will be a Commander this year regardless, unless he does something really bad on these stories.
Yeah.
Which we really hope he doesn't. But yeah, I think that Jaden Daniels is a big reason why the Commanders are going after him. I think if Jaden Daniels isn't the quarterback here, they would have already signed Stephon Diggs.
And I really do think, there's 2 angles to look at it from this way, and I hate to, call out Jaden in this manner, but, at what point does he stop becoming, hey, I want to play with my friend, and, hey, we need to do what's best for the team?
Well, that's the thing, man. I think, Jaden legitimately thinks he's what's best for the team. Because I think that I legitimately think Brandon Aiyuk is still good at football. I believe George Kittle when he says that he was moving fast and still cutting on a dime and stopping and doing all that stuff. But, I just think because of his friendship with Aiyuk, maybe he's a little bit blind. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe he does. You know what I'm saying though? He wants to view his friend in the best possible light, which is completely understandable, right?
Yeah, if obviously you're gonna vouch for your guy, but at the end of the day, man, it's really getting hard, especially Jaden explaining this to Adam Peters and, Dan Quinn of hey, this guy's going to be best for our team. Okay, why is he acting like this? What is he saying? what exactly do you say in that situation? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I think Jaden Daniels obviously wants to have someone he can connect with, but like, man, it's getting really hard to defend his actions day in, day out, and it's got to feel exhausting for this Commanders organization. And, for the 49ers too, in some part. I mean, obviously they share some blame, but it's not like they did him right of paying him. They were about to trade him, and then they were like, hey, we're going to trade you to the Steelers. He went in and said, no, I want this contract, and I'll sign for this. 49ers said, okay. They gave him that big contract. He gets hurt, and now all of this has happened. They paid him.
Yep, they paid him, and I mean, he said it himself on his IG. I think the pronunciation was stupid. They're stupid for paying him all that money,
and like
not exactly a great message to send to your next employer. But
it's like me going up to my boss and going like, "Hey, I want a contractor. I want a raise," and I get the raise, and then all of a sudden, I just
stopped doing the work.
I stopped doing work. I stopped showing up. I show up at like 1:00 in the afternoon, and I don't do my work. And I'm like, all right, I quit. And then now I'm actively looking for work and blasting my old job.
Yeah, and I think the final straw for Aiyuk was the way that the team kind of approached his rehab, where I think he wanted to do his rehab with his people, which is, by the way,
fine,
more than fair. But, like, I think the 49ers wanted to be involved a little bit more and at least wanted updates. And I think Aiyuk just wanted to, like, do his own thing. And, like, I think after the team invests a certain amount of dollars in you, they have a certain right to know how the rehab is going and getting updates and you coming into the building and all that different stuff. And Aiyuk just didn't want to do that stuff. I'm not saying that the 49ers handled this situation perfectly or anything like that. But, like, this is somebody that we know has a bit of a short fuse. Like, what happens when the Commanders are the team that is in the crossfires here for Brandon Aiyuk? Is that a possibility?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, oh, yeah, sure, he has a bounce-back season with us. Right. Great. That's awesome. We pay him all this money. Is he guaranteed to be happy? Like, I've always been on the train of, if not here, it will be nowhere else. And I really do think that's true. But, like, man, like, if he does have a fallout with the Commanders, what does that do with Jaden Daniels? How does that affect contract negotiations? How does that affect everything? Like, this has the chance to completely blow up in the Commanders' face.
It does, which is why it's so scary. But at the same time, the reward is high. It is. Like, Aiyuk, I think, can still ball. But Antonio Brown could still ball the F out when he was going crazy with the Raiders, the Patriots, and the Buccaneers. He was still a very good football player at that point. I'm not saying Brandon Aiyuk is Antonio Brown, at least not yet, because Antonio has done a lot of stuff, criminal stuff, that Brandon has not done. All right, so I want to be completely fair to Brandon Aiyuk. He's not Antonio Brown. All right, but some of the social media behavior and the calling out of the team, there are some parallels here that, is scary. If you are a Washington Commanders fan and you are putting, the future of this year's team on his shoulders as your wide receiver too. From a financial standpoint, there's really no risk involved here. It's going to be a low-level contract. The Commanders, I doubt, are going to pay him a lot of money. It's going to be a one-year deal with no guarantees. If he misbehaves, if he steps out of line, he's going to be out of here faster than you can say Brandon Aiyuk. All right? But in that regard, there's very little risk. But this is a big season for the Commanders, man. And, if Jaden Daniels is ready to take that next step, having that legit wide receiver too would go a long way. And if Aiyuk is misbehaving, if he can't stay healthy, if he's not the player he once was, all these certain things that could go wrong in this situation, it's going to be a wasted opportunity because you had Stephon Diggs sitting right there, who was like a bona fide number 2 receiver. But listen,
he wants to play with you, and
he wants to play with the team. Like, it's just like, if this doesn't work out, it's just gonna be one of those in retrospect moments where it's like, that was a ginormous missed opportunity. But listen, I'm rooting for Brandon. I hope he signs with the Commanders. I hope he plays really well. And I hope, he gets paid a lot of money, and he's completely the perfect citizen or whatever when he's here with Washington, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's a great teammate. He does everything that he's supposed to do, and it was just the 49ers. It was just the bitch-ass pussies over there with the San Francisco 49ers.
The stupid
49ers, and he's done calling out his teams. That is my genuine wish for Brandon Aiyuk. But given some of his behavior that we have seen over not just this offseason, Ponzi, the last 3 offseasons, I mean, there's an established pattern of behavior here that's concerning. So we'll just have to see what happens.
And so get your more #Commanders questions. If you want to talk about Brandon Aiyuk, you want to talk about Stephon Diggs, you want to talk about David Blough's new offense, it has to be all together. #Commanders. Otherwise, our software won't pull. I've only still have 2 questions. So let's get those questions in so we can do a mailbag.
All right, man. Well, let's get into our next segment here. By the way, I will have Brandon Aiyuk in this roster projection. I do think he will be a Washington Commander this year. So without further ado, let's talk about the other 52 players that I think will be on the Washington Commanders as we head into Week 1 of the 2026 NFL season. Welcome into the Commanders Report by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. I am your host, Jack Sperry, and today I'm going to be revealing my first Commanders roster projection of the 2026 season. Now that we're past Commanders OTA's mandatory minicamp is over, and now we're in this period of waiting for Commanders training camp. This will be my first roster projection for the Commanders 53-man roster as we approach the 2026 NFL season. Make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you are pumped for the start of this season like we are here on the Commanders Report, it also helps boost the YouTube algorithm. So if you want to help get more eyeballs on the channel and you want to do your part to help this channel grow, click that thumbs up icon. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, so we'll start here with the quarterbacks that I'm projecting to make the 53-man roster. Jaden Daniels, of course, backup quarterback Marcus Mariota, then rookie quarterback out of Rutgers, Ethan Kalmakis, I think will be the QB3. And listen, man, I'm sure they'll keep Jaden Daniels' buddy Sam Hartman on the practice squad like they always do, even though he'll probably play terribly in the preseason like he always does. But, that just is what it is. But I think Kalmakis will beat him out for the QB3 job this year. And maybe if Kalmakis shows enough behind the scenes this year, he might even be the future QB2 behind Jaden Daniels here in D.C. But then we shift our focus to the rest of the offense here. Running backs, I'm going to project 4 make the team. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Rashad White, Jeremy McNichols, and Katron Allen. I will project Jerome Ford to not make this team. Then we get to the wide receivers. I'm going to take Terry McLaurin. Yes, I do have Brandon Aiyuk on this roster projection. He is not currently on the roster, but all signs continue to point to Aiyuk signing with the Commanders the second the 49ers eventually let him go, which will be before the start of the 2026 NFL season. Then Antonio Williams, Treylon Burks, De'Ami Brown, Jalen Lane, and Luke McCaffrey is who I have projected to round out the rest of the group. I have 7 wide receivers being held by the Washington Commanders. Lane will be your punt return man. Luke McCaffrey will be your primary kickoff return man. That'll be the roles for those guys in this group. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Will Washington carry more or less than 6.5 receivers this year? Type M if you think they carry more than that, or type L if you think they will carry less than that, and Jalen Lane, Luke McCaffrey, or somebody else is going to get cut from this Commanders roster. Now, while you guys answer that question, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor here at Prize Picks and a potential really good projection for you guys to use in your Week 1 lineups for the Washington Commanders when the Burgundy and Gold will take on the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. I'm taking the less on passing yards for quarterback Jalen Hurts. And, not only has Hurts not gotten more than that 215.5 passing yards mark in his last 4 games going back to last season, but it's a brand new offense for Philly this year. He's going to be asked to play a lot more under center, which I think he'll be uncomfortable with to start the season. No more A.J. Brown. And then also, I think the Commanders defense that the Eagles don't have really any film on at this point, I think is going to wreak havoc. I think they're going to put him in a mental pretzel with the various different blitz looks that they're going to throw at him. I think the Commanders defense defense will start their season strong versus Jalen Hurts. That's why I'm taking the less on his passing yards for week 1. I'm also taking the more on Jaden Daniels' passing yards and the more on receiving yards for Terry McLaurin. With this particular projection, you could win $95 from our friends at Prize Picks on just a $20 entry fee. And what Prize Picks calls a power play, that means you have to get all 3 of these projections correct to cash in. But if you do so, you get more winnings. So download the Prize Picks app today to join the fun and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with our friends at Prize Picks. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app today. And a big thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring the Commanders Report. Continuing on here with the offense, I'm going to project the Commanders to carry 4 tight ends, Chika Okonkwo, John Bates, Ben Sinnott, and Colson Yankoff as a special teams specialist for that tight end room. They've carried 4 the last several years. Chika Okonkwo just replaces Zach Ertz's role as that top of the lineup guy. But then we get to the offensive line. The starters I project to be Laramie Tunsil, Brandon Coleman, unfortunately Nick Allegretti at center, Sam Cosmi at right guard, and Josh Connerly Jr. at right tackle. And then when it comes to the depth, I like that Andrew Wiley and Chris Paul can play both guard and center. And then Matt Golban, the rookie out of Michigan State, I project to be the backup center for the Washington Commanders this year, meaning 8 offensive linemen make the team in my projection. But then we get to the other side of the ball here. True defensive tackles, I'll carry 4 with Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, Tim Settle, and Jerzon Newton. By the way, all 4 of these guys I think will have their role inside the Commanders defense this year and will be a part of the rotation. Then we get to the edge defenders, Adafe Owe, Dorrance Armstrong, I'm projecting to be the starters, with Kaylavon Chason being the designated pass rusher. Then Dietrich Wise, Charles Omenihu will be more of like 5 techniques when they want to go to their 5-man fronts in their base formations. Joshua Josephs also makes the team as a 4th edge rusher. Then we get to the inside backers. I'm going to have them carry 5 with Leo Chanel, Sonny Styles as probably the guys getting the lion's share of snaps, within Frankie Louvu still part of this rotation as well. And then Jordan McGee, Kane Medrano also make the team as young, athletic special teams pieces and linebacker depth. Then at safety, Nick Cross and Quan Martin I think will be your starters. Will Harris I think will be more of a hybrid defensive player, a big nickel type of guy that can also play either safety spot. Jeremy Reeves and then Tyler Owens will make the team as well as special teams pieces. Then at the cornerback spot, I'm going to have Trey Amos, Mike Samerstroll, Meek Robertson. Those will be your presumptive 3 starting corners this year, with Akella Witherspoon as outside cornerback depth. In terms of slot depth, not only can Samerstroll and Robertson both play the slot, but also Will Harris can serve as a big nickel if need be. Then on the special teams unit, I'm going to take Tress Way as the punter. Of course, Drew Stevens, I'm going to project to win the kicker battle over Jake Moody. And then I've got Tyler Ott as the long snapper for the Washington Commanders this year. Now, in terms of the guys that I would keep on the practice squad and I would prioritize, I think, Sam Hartman, like we mentioned, probably makes this list. But for me, I would just cut bait with Sam Hartman. I think there's better practice squad quarterbacks out there, to be quite frank with you. But Robert Henry Jr. is a UDFA that I'm really excited about out of University of Texas San Antonio. Really good speed, and I'm really excited to see what he can do once we get into camp. I think he'll be a camp standout. And then Tim McKay, a young offensive lineman, I think will make the practice squad. Shai Tuttle, he's got some experience playing on this defensive line. I think there's a chance he could make the team, but I'm going to project him to make the practice squad here. Ricky Barber, the same way. Had some flashes last year, worth keeping around on the P squad. Drake Jackson, I think they'll try and keep him on the practice squad if a team doesn't snatch him up on the waiver wire. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I think, is similar. Then Ali Cahoe at the linebacker spot. I liked some of the flashes he showed last year. Percy Butler's been around the organization for a long time, but it just seems like this coaching staff doesn't have a ton of belief in him, if I'm being completely honest with you. Then Antonio Hamilton Sr., some depth there at corner. Same thing goes with Darius Rush, who was a standout at OTAs. Could maybe even sneak on to the final roster, but didn't have enough room for him in today's projection. So what say you guys? Who's a player that you think will surprisingly not make the Washington Commanders roster this year? Let me know your answer to that question down there in the comments section. And that'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. I'll catch you guys next time. If you don't want to miss that, make sure you click that subscribe button, turn on those notifications to get notified whenever we put out new content. And until next time, guys, go raise some hail. All right, roster projection in the books. And now we got one more projection to go here, guys. Oh, not one more projection, one more cut, one more segment to go here. And it's, of course, your questions on the Commanders Report mailbag. Ponzi, how we doing on questions here? We still need some more?
Right now we have 7.
All right, we got 7. So we usually like to have 8. So if we could get 1 or 2 more, we can do that. We'll put a shot clock on there. So you guys got 3 minutes to get your questions in. Hashtag Commanders or Super Chat to get your questions on the show here for the mailbag. And Ponzi, and for as much as we are talking about Brandon Aiyuk and maybe some of the concerns that we have about bringing him in here, I do think that it is worth mentioning that there's still a better chance than not, for sure, that he's going to be on this team this year. And with his connection with Jaden Daniels, the established chemistry that they already have, I think there is some reason to have optimism for him to have a good season this year.
Yeah.
I still think there's question marks in terms of will he, behave himself off the field? Will he be a good teammate? Well, I'm sure he probably will. But here's the thing, though, Ponzi. With all these concerns that I've been saying, this is kind of the counter argument to it. If he's going to behave himself anywhere, it's going to be here because he's not going to want to ruin his chances of playing with his best friend, Jaden Daniels, right? If he's going to figure it out and if he's going to work out anywhere in the NFL, it's going to be right here in Washington, D.C. for playing for the Washington Commanders, which, listen, man, if you want to be optimistic about this situation, that is as optimistic as I can get about this Brandon Aiyuk situation, is that he's incentivized to want to, I don't want to say keep his mouth shut because that sounds like shut up and dribble or whatever.
Yeah,
but I just want players to focus on the things that they should be focusing on. You know what I'm saying? Focus on helping the team win. Be a team player, all that different stuff. And that's very important to Dan Quinn, the head coach. So it'll be interesting to see how he feels about Brandon Aiyuk because he preaches selfless, teammates and stuff like that. And I'm sure Brandon, is a good guy when you get to know him. It's just like when he's going on Twitter and Instagram and he's like trolling his previous employer, it's not necessarily the best look, right? So I do think that he still has some juice left in him. He's only 28 years old. He was a very good football player before he got that major injury. But yeah, man, can he stay out of trouble? Can he stay off the IR? And then is he still a good football player compared to what he once was? Those are the 3 big question marks. And, is it possible that all 3 answers to those questions are yes, and he ends up being a really good piece for this team this year, not to mention maybe in future seasons? I certainly hope so. All right, but to ignore or to not acknowledge that there is pretty significant risk involved with bringing this player in, I think you're kind of, you're kind of blinding yourself to maybe the possibilities of things that could go wrong here.
Yeah, and it's just really, really just concerning because these aren't minor things, guys. These are kind of huge. So I really do think that obviously if there's going to be anywhere he succeeds, it's going to be here.
Yes.
But, it is just, I think the Commanders have put themselves in a pretzel that they shouldn't have put themselves in.
Well, honestly, they can get out of the pretzel right now by signing Stephon Diggs.
They're drowning, but the floatie's right there.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels is saying, "Don't pick up the floaty."
Wait for my friend to get here.
Yeah, wait for my friend to get here. And you're. I don't want to say you're drowning because there's the possibility that Brandon Aiyuk is awesome, right? I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that Aiyuk is for sure going to be a failure. It's for sure going to be a poor choice. It's just I think there are some pretty big risks with this, and the team seems okay with it, so I'm going to trust them on it. But, over the last couple of years, some of the personnel decisions that this team has made outside of bringing in Jaden Daniels, which was obviously brilliant, but it was kind of hard to fuck up that decision with the number 2 pick. Outside of that, they haven't had a ton of big-time personnel addition wins. You know what I'm saying? They brought in Deebo Samuel last year. I would say Laramie Tunsil's one of their bigger wins, but they brought in old Bobby Wagner, Marshawn Lattimore trade. Has this organization and this front office really earned our trust in terms of their evaluation of these players? I don't know, man. It's a good question, but Guess we'll find out the answers here in the weeks to come. Certainly going to be an interesting season. I'll say that right now, Ponzi. There's already a ton of juice surrounding this football team because of Aiyuk. That's not going to change. So at least we have something fun to talk about and something interesting to talk about here on the show. But without further ado, guys, let's get into the final segment on today's live show by answering your questions on the Burgundy and Gold. Welcome into the Commanders Report by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get $50 instantly in additional lineups from our friends at Prize Picks. And today, guys, it's my favorite segment of the week. It is the Commanders Report mailbag, where I'm answering your questions on the Burgundy and Gold. At the time of me recording this video on Thursday, we are right in the midst of the Brandon Aiyuk saga, and by the time this video comes out, I kind of doubt that it's been resolved, all right? So I'm sure we're going to get some BA questions on today's show, maybe some other topics. Can't wait to dive into it with you guys, but before we do, make sure you guys click that subscribe button and join us here on the Commanders Report. We're over 50,000 strong in terms of our subscriber base. We're currently the largest individually run Commanders news program anywhere here on YouTube. That's because we consistently get you guys in-depth and free Commanders content on this channel. We post daily, including doing these weekly mailbags. So if you guys want to join the most interactive fan community for Commanders fans anywhere here on YouTube, make sure you guys click that subscribe button right now. $2 super chat from my guy Terry Maples to sign the Diggs brothers and let's roll. Listen, man, I would be open to that idea for sure. I mean, you guys know that I would sign Stephon Diggs over Brandon Aiyuk. Not to say that I think if the Commanders sign Aiyuk, that would for sure be a failure or anything like that, or that I'm completely against signing Aiyuk. It's just I think Diggs would provide maybe a little bit more stability in terms of, we've seen him play more recently. We saw him last year be a number one receiver on a team that made the Super Bowl. I think that he'd be a great scheme fit for what David Blough wants to do here in Washington. I just think that, sure, Diggs comes with his own, can of worms off the field because he's kind of a playboy and kind of is being a little bit generous to Stephon Diggs there. But, he's a very good football player. And, he's everywhere that he's been, the Vikings, the Bills, and then, of course, the Patriots in Houston, by the way, have all talked about how great of a worker he is, how good of a teammate he is when he's in the building. So I think he'd be a great addition to the Commanders, but I do think at this point they probably do sign Brandon Aiyuk, and I think that they're probably good in their cornerback room right now, at least from their perspective. If I had to guess right now, I don't think either Diggs brother gets signed to the Commanders this year. Then we go on from Flex Skins. He says, hey, Jack, do you think that the team is prepared to start the season with Nick Allegretti starting at center, or do you think we will bring someone in like Graham Glasgow? Unfortunately, I think they're prepared to go into the season with Nick Allegretti. Now, I really hope Allegretti proves me wrong, all right? But I was skeptical of his signing back in 2024. I thought he was just okay. He was replacement level that first season. Then he couldn't even win the left guard job over Brandon Coleman last year. And now all of a sudden we're expecting him to move over to a different position and to be a good starter at a position he's never played at before in terms of being a full-time starter in this league. I think the Commanders went all in on Tyler Linderbaum, and they thought they were going to get him, and they really, made a hard push to go get him, and the Raiders ended up outbidding them. And they kind of didn't know what to do at that point, and they said, you know what, we're just going to go with Allegretti. They do bring in Matt Golban out of Michigan State. We'll see if he can kind of usurp Allegretti in camp and see, if he's ready to go day one. But I'd be lying to you guys if I said, the center position was in a good spot here in Washington, which is one of my more premium concerns when it comes to this football team this year. JD is King says, what do you think Jaden Daniels' extension will look like? Drake May and Caleb Williams are projected to get a lot, but people forget about JD5. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be $60+ million a season. Tell you that right now. It could get up to like 65, maybe even more than that compared, depending on what Caleb gets, depending on what May gets. I'll say this, though, man. If I'm the Commanders, I'm trying to get my deal done first because, if you wait and Caleb Williams gets $68 million a year, guess how much Jaden's going to want? 69. Pause, right? Nice. All those different things. I just think that, the longer you wait with these kinds of situations, the more you end up paying. So I hope that, once he becomes eligible, so long as he's not asking for anything completely ridiculous, like $15 million or something like that above market value, I would try and get this done pretty quickly and lock him up. I know he's got some injury concerns, and we'll see how he plays this year, but I think he's going to have a really good season this year, and I think he's going to be more than worth a big-time contract extension when he becomes eligible, and it will surpass Dak Prescott's number at $60 million per season. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. What will Jaden Daniels' contract look like? What do you guys think? Let me know down there in the comment section, or maybe a better question is, do you think he'll be the highest paid quarterback in all of football when he gets his deal? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. While you answer that question, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor here on the show, which is Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The World Cup is finally here, so you can get your soccer lineups in over the next several weeks, or if that's not really your thing, Prize Picks has a number of other sports to choose from, like baseball and more, to enhance your sports viewing experience this summer. You guys can even look ahead to next year's football season, like in this for projection lineup that I have on Prize Picks heading into next season. I'm taking the more on total season passing yards on Dak Prescott, as well as the more on rushing yards for Bill Krosky Merritt, passing yards for Jaden Daniels, and receiving touchdowns for Scary Terry McLaurin. This is a 10x multiplier, so if you guys put in a $20 entry fee and you get all 4 of these correct in what's called a power play on the Prize Picks app, you guys can walk away with 10 times your money with $200 in winnings. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with our friends at Prize Picks. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app today. As always, play responsibly. And a big thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring the Commanders Report. Got one here from Commandante. JD5 says, will the wide receiver room depth be good enough after adding Brandon Aiyuk? Will the tight end room have enough talent this season? The answer to that question is I hope so. You hope that Brandon Aiyuk can come in and be that legitimate wide receiver too. Because I think the Commanders will play a lot of 12 personnel this year. I think they do want John Bates out there quite a bit as their blocking tight end, especially on early downs. And then Chigakonkwo, who's not as good of a blocker, he's more of a receiving weapon out there as, the receiving tight end. You only need 2 receivers that can consistently get it done for you, right? And Terry McLaurin, and then if you get an 85, 90% of what Brandon Aiyuk was in his prime there with the 49ers, that is a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. He was an all-pro in his prime, right? So if you can get anywhere close to that from Brandon Aiyuk, you're going to be pretty well set in your number 1 and number 2. And then when you do go to 3 receiver sets, I think Antonio Williams is a very good third option in the slot. Also, De'Ami Brown can provide some good stuff. He has a good connection with Jaden Daniels. Treylon Burks can be the big body rotational guy. I do kind of like the depth that the Washington Commanders have at receiver, if I'm being honest with you, assuming you have that legitimate number 2 receiver piece in Brandon Aiyuk. We'll see if Aiyuk ends up being that for us this year. In terms of the tight end room, I do think there is enough talent there. We'll see if Ben Sinnott takes a step forward, and we'll see, if that group can stay healthy. Shaggy coming in here with a question. My man says, what are other wide receiver free agency options other than Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs? And is there a chance we will sign anybody else besides any of the names we discuss? Not really, man. There's DeAndre Hopkins that's worth mentioning. You could try and trade for Brian Thomas Jr., even though I doubt the Jaguars are trading him at this point. Kayshon Boutte is probably available for like a mid-day 3 pick. I wouldn't mind that trade either. But, we're getting to the point of the offseason here, my man Shaggy, where there's just not a whole lot of options, right? So we'll see what they end up doing. I mean, at this point, it seems pretty obvious that they're going after Brandon Aiyuk and that they're going to sign him the second the 49ers release him. So that's where I think we're standing right now. But then James Wood Truther says, if the Commanders have a bad year, will Dan Quinn and Adam Peters be fired or just on the hot seat? Depends how bad, my friend. If it's really bad, like 5 wins, yeah, they could be fired 100%. Like if it's a complete disaster, if the new coordinators are a complete disaster, if Jaden Daniels isn't looking great, if the defense, is a mess, all these different things, then yeah, I do think that they could be fired. I think Adam Peters is somebody that's not Adam Peters, but Josh Harris, I think, is somebody that is rather impatient. Now, I do think Peters has a longer leash as a GM than Dan Quinn does as a head coach. and kind of like how Dan Quinn let Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. take the fall last offseason. It might be Adam Peters letting Dan Quinn take the fall this year if that's the case, and then we'll see with another regime if Peters can turn it around. But definitely Dan Quinn, man. Like if it's a bad season and they're not even close to the playoffs again this year, and it's another disaster year for this football team, 2 years in a row, disasters, that's fireable in the National Football League. I really like DQ. I don't think that's going to be what happens this year. I think this team will be better than that, and I think DQ will be the head coach here for a long time. I truly believe in him. But if it is another disaster year for the Washington Commanders, Dan Quinn's head certainly could be on the chopping block this year. Now, before we get into the rest of your questions on the Commanders Report mailbag this week, I want to tell you about our other sponsor here on the show, which is our friends at SeatGeek. The Commanders 2026 schedule is now set, and you can now purchase individual game tickets for every home, away, and international game the Commanders will play this season on the SeatGeek app. Use code CHAT10 to get 10% off your next set of tickets. And guys, the SeatGeek app is super easy to use and maneuver. You just pick your game on the home screen there, and then it's going to take you in where you get the look at the stadium, and you guys can really see the in-depth look at the value seats that are available that are for sale on their website and on their app. And guys, whether it's a baseball game with the kids this summer or an Ed Sheeran concert with the wife, SeatGeek has your back. Each ticket is rated on a value scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. In terms of the visual aspect of it, look for the green dots to find the good values on their app. Green obviously means good, and red means bad. And of course, I have a code for you guys to get an even better deal. Use code CHAT10 for 10% off your next set of tickets with our friends at SeatGeek. One more time, that's 10% off any tickets with promo code CHAT10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later on. And a big thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. My man King's Gold is in here. Says, with the Commanders' new and improved front seven, do you think that is enough to relieve pressure off the secondary? Well, here's the thing, King's Gold. I think what's going to put pressure off the secondary is the scheme. And I think the superstar of the Brian Flores scheme is the scheme. And what I mean by that is they do a lot of creative things to get, rushers free and blitzing and doing all this different stuff to kind of speed up the process of the quarterback, right? Because if the quarterback is kind of worried about, who's blitzing, who's dropping out, I don't know what I'm seeing here, what is that going to lead to? That's going to lead to bad decision-making, and that's going to lead to some panic from opposing quarterbacks, and specifically younger quarterbacks. I think young quarterbacks are going to struggle against the Washington Commanders this year. And what I like about this group is how many good blitzers they have. Leo Chenal is an excellent blitzer. Frankie Louvu, the best thing he does is still blitzing. Sonny Styles is an excellent blitzer in the linebacking room, right? Amik Robertson is very physical. He's a good blitzing slot corner. And there's just a lot of different players that the Commanders can send at any given time, and I like how versatile a lot of the players that they have in the middle of their defense are, right? Nick Cross, Sonny Styles, like these guys can move to different spaces, in the defensive formation, and I'm really excited to see how those guys get deployed. So the answer to your question here, King's Gold, is yes. I do think that this front seven is good enough if it's paired with the right amount of scheme and enough deception on the part of Durante Jones. Definitely think that this defense, the scheme itself is good enough, in my opinion, to elevate the talent that we have. I think is the best way to put it. Then we got one from AJ Believer. Says, what do you think of potentially trading for Kayshon Boutte? It wouldn't cost much to get him, plus JD played with him at LSU. I would love it, man. I would like it a lot. Boutte showed some really good things last year, but guess who was better than Boutte last year? Stephon Diggs. Now, he's not. Now, Diggs is obviously older. If you want to make the more long-term play, maybe send a fifth-round pick for Kayshon Boutte. That's something that is very, very realistic. He's got that chemistry with Jaden Daniels that, a lot of people point to when it comes to the positives with the Brandon Aiyuk situation. But, I mean, if they wanted Kayshon Boutte, I think they would have already got that deal done. We got a report a few weeks ago that they haven't even called the Patriots about Kayshon Boutte. So don't think the Commanders are showing all that much interest in him, if I'm being honest with you here, AJ. I think at this point, they're probably locked in on Brandon Aiyuk. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Would you accept this trade? Would you trade a fifth-round pick next year in exchange for Kayshon Boutte? college teammate for Jaden Daniels that is currently available on the trade block. Give me an A for accept or D for decline. Give me your answer down there in the comment section to finish this week's mailbag. I greatly appreciate you guys stopping by here today to talk some Commanders football with me. I hope you'll put in a question in a future Commanders Report mailbag. So until next time, guys, I greatly appreciate your guys' support. And until then, hail to the Commanders. All right, man, we're going to get out of here. I appreciate all the discussion. I appreciate all the points made. Whenever you have a topic as fiery as the Brandon Aiyuk situation, where there's very clear sides being taken, Ponzi, I would say. Like, some people are like, Brandon Aiyuk has done nothing wrong. He's going to be amazing this year, all this different stuff. And then, there's the other side that says, like, he's a bad person. He's the next stage Antonio Brown. He's crazy, all these different things. And, I'm trying to do my best to kind of play in the middle of that and kind of, see the points that both sides are making and coming to my own conclusion on that. And that can be a tough tightrope to walk, let me tell you, all right? Because, this is very fiery and, people have their opinions on it. And, frankly, I don't want to step on any toes, but also, I want to tell you guys what I'm actually thinking. And what I'm thinking about the situation is, I know Jaden Daniels, he's his best friend in the world, but, there's a lot of red flags here. And, if Stephon Diggs was already on the team, I would have no premonitions whatsoever, Ponzi, about bringing him in. Because you already have that established wide receiver 2 here. So if Aiyuk doesn't behave himself, if he gets injured again, if he's not any good, you still have that other receiver too. But if you bring in Aiyuk and you're depending on him to be your number 2 receiver, there's just a lot of things there where it's like they're risks. They just are, right? So I hope Aiyuk can maybe not prove me wrong, just, hit those green lights. Show that he can stay focused. Show that he can stay healthy. Show that he is still that player that was a second-team All-Pro just a few seasons ago. I think it's still in there. I think he probably has a very good heart as a human being, and I'm rooting for him. And I'm rooting for him to be a Washington Commander. I'm rooting for him to have a good season. I'm rooting for him to be mentally healthy for the rest of his life. That is what I'm hoping for Brandon Aiyuk at this point, guys. It's definitely a crazy saga that I think we thought, Ponzi, was going to get resolved in March at free agency. We thought the 49ers would release him at the start of free agency. That didn't happen, and then we got to the draft, still nothing. Then we got to OTAs, and still nothing. And now we're sitting here just a few weeks before the start, about a month before the start of training camp, and nothing's happened. So
I really do hope this works out. I really do hope that the Commanders aren't making a mistake here. That's all I could say about Brandon Aiyuk. I've said my piece about my concerns with him. But at the end of the day, I think we're all rooting for the Commanders and for this to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love nothing more than for Brandon Aiyuk to ball out with this team. I'm just also not going to lie or pull the wool over your eyes when it comes to the very real risks that exist with this player, right? But at the same time, the reward is very fun. Pairing Jaden Daniels back up with his best friend, who he played very well with at Arizona State, former All-Pro receiver, pairing him up with Terry McLaurin. In this offense in particular that can really take advantage of a skill set like his, it's exciting, man. And I will be excited for this season if Brandon Aiyuk is on this team. It's just if we have to deal with the IG stories every day when he's here and he's going to turn his crosshairs on the Commanders instead of the 49ers, it's not going to be as fun, right? So I'm hoping that everything works out. We'll see if it does. Of course, we'll see you guys next week on the Commanders Report live show. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Until next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.